Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Ji Aina Sangat Ji, welcome to The Breakfast Show, live from London studio. A very warm welcome to you all and to your families. I hope this is Sare Chardi Kala de Vich and I've had a very good week. So as you know, every week Sangat Ji ਅਸੀਂ try ਕਰਦੇ to bring on some very inspirational guests and, you know, inspiring guests that are inspiring us as well as the community and the wider community, regardless of whether ਤੁਸੀਂ Sikh or non-Sikhs. So today we have a very inspirational guest back with us in the studio on The Breakfast Show by the name of Satpal Ji from Naam, and I'm sure ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੁਣ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ you're here joining us, you probably already know who VG is, and if you don't know, you'll be sure to find out today. And I'm sure after today's show we're going to be getting the feedback that we always do. VG ne kado auna, when is VG going to come back, can we get the YouTube link? So we've got VG here. Please ਤੁਸੀਂ enjoy kariyo as we speak to Bhaji, and the topic today is going to be about, are we really happy? So, you know, for you that are in Chardi Kala, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this. And for those of you that maybe might be feeling, you know, a little bit not that you're not happy, after today, hopefully the show will help you to realize how we can be happy within ourselves, because we all have those moments where we are up and down within life. But ultimately, as Sikhi always tells us, to be in Chardi Kala, let's find out a little bit more about how we can be happy. Bhaji, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. It's such a pleasure to have you back once again. And, you know, thank you for always giving us your time out of your busy schedule. You always give us that time. So, you know, very humble to have you back here. God bless you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here.
So, Bhaji, let's start with, are we really happy is the topic. So, I guess I'd like to ask from my own question, you know, Chardi Kala for me is happiness. You know, Chardi Kala literal, always being Chardi Kala, Sikhi for me, my Bani, everything for me helps me to stay happy. But you know, what is happiness and how do we know if we are happy then?
So I think this is a really interesting subject today. I'm really looking forward to talking about it because, you know, we can talk about Sikhi in terms of history and we can talk about Sikhi in terms of concepts, but I think it actually boils down to one very simple thing, which is Sukh. How do I get more happiness in my life? You know, everyone's here on this planet for however many years they're here, and most of us are looking for a way to just be happy in our life. So it's really important. It sounds like a really simple concept that we're going to be talking about, or they're only going to be talking about happiness today, but I think when we a little bit deeper into it, we're going to discover that there's a lot more to the subject than we first thought about. And I think the first question, the most fundamental question that you've asked is how do we define what happiness is? I think happiness means different things to different people, but to me, I think it's essentially a state of being worry-free.
Okay, so chinta, not having chinta.
Yeah, not having worries in your life, and having this kind of sense of pleasure in how you conduct your daily life, in the day-to-day things that you're surrounding your life with, and the things that are happening in the world that are out of your control is. For me, happiness is a state of mind. I don't define happiness as an external thing at all. It's certainly not about how you portray yourself to other people. For me, it's just like what's actually happening within yourself. And we have to acknowledge that at some points in our life, everyone goes through this feeling of your ups and your downs. Everyone goes through points at where they just feel incomplete in their life, and there's something empty and something missing in your life. And I think we have to acknowledge that happiness is probably one of the biggest drivers in our life. Like, why do you get out of bed in the morning? Why do you go to work in the morning? You go to work to earn money, but you don't do it for the money. You do it because you think that money can actually kind of give you a lifestyle which makes you be a little bit happier in your life. So the reason we do everything in our life, and we also like, why do we get our children to go to school every day? Because we know that a good education will mean a good job, which will mean a more comfortable life, which ultimately will mean that they'll be happier in their life rather than struggling in their life. So happiness is at the root cause of almost everything that we do in our life.
But then, Bhaji, is there different types of happiness? Like what? Because, for example, so in my life, you know, I've met so many different people, and you know, some of them you realize because they tell you their story of their life after, basically. So as an example, you know, I've interviewed somebody, and you know, I've interviewed them and they're so much in Chardi Kala, they're so happy. After you finish the show, you actually have a proper chat with them about their life, and you realize, you know, I would look at it like, this person's so happy, but yeah, look at what they've gone through, and they're still going through it, but they're this really happy person. So what are the different types of happiness? Because to me, that person's happy, but yet they're not. Do you see what I mean? So
yeah, I think that this is where it goes back to this idea that happiness is very much an internal thing. is not dependent on the external environment. And I think we as a society, we don't generally push that idea. We push the idea that the more things that you surround yourself with, the more comforts that you surround yourself with, the more happy you are. And the question I always throw back to other people when thinking like this is, if that's the case, then all the billionaires in the world are the happiest people in the world.
Yeah.
Now let's think about that. Are all the celebrities the happiest people in the world?
No.
Are all the richest businessmen in the world, are they the happiest people in the world? And when we look at that in that way, then we realize actually they're not that happy. You still have celebrities that are doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things because they've earned all their money. And I think they reach a point where they actually say, I have nothing else left to buy. I've bought everything and I'm still not happy. So what they've realized is happiness had nothing to do with the external world. And so this is where we're also seeing examples. We see a lot of times where charity workers and people from the media, certainly in the West, they go out to what they would call more sort of developing countries, poorer countries, and they see children which are like living in absolute squalor and terrible conditions. So we think they shouldn't be happy, except they always come back and say, we couldn't believe how happy those children were. Mm-hmm. You know, anyone who goes and does some charity work in some poorer countries, they always come back and say, we couldn't believe how happy those children were. It doesn't make sense to us. So happiness is less to do with the external. And so you know, going back to your question, you asked about, are there different types of happiness? Mm-hmm. I think this is where people get really confused. I think people confused fun, they can confuse entertainment, they confuse excitement with things like happiness. So I think there are different levels of happiness, and I'd like to almost go through what I think are some of the different levels of happiness. Please. On the very basic level, we have to look at people's happiness is to some extent tied in with the external environment. So as long as you have your basic needs like your food, your shelter, warmth, security, protection, those are your absolute basic needs that almost everyone needs. I'm talking about the real just common man. Of course there are going to be exceptions to all of these things. There are going to be people who have no food that are still happy. But on the general basis, I think you need your basic pleasures. You need, and I think you could almost call them necessities. In order to be happy, you need your basic kind of necessities. Companionship is another one. You know, people who have everything but they don't have anyone in their life. So that's your basic kind of needs, I'd call that. In order to be happy, you need that. But what happens at that point? Once you've got your basic needs met, then the human being isn't happy with just that. Now let's compare ourselves to animals. All animals are perfectly content with feeling safe, with having, you know, their mate and having offspring, and they have food. That's pretty much it. They don't actually strive for anything more than that. The human is a slightly different animal. We work in a different way. So once we have those basic needs, we then move on to sensory pleasures. So that's the point at which we start adding a bit of spice and flavor to our life and enjoyment. And that's where things like music and art and good food comes in, and nice clothes. You kind of feel happier when you get those things in your life. And I think that's where the majority of humanity is stuck. We're kind of just stuck at what I would say the second level, which is we're just looking after entertainment. So, you know, we're not just happy with eating a salad every day. We've got to put some nice flavors on there. We've got to have some nice foods. And then you start having things essentially which are bad for you. Like you put a lot of cheese and a lot of salt and a lot of sugar in your foods. Why? Because those sensory pleasures are what you then perceive to be happiness. Yeah. And so to me, that's like the second level of happiness. Okay. The third level of happiness is what I would call contentment. Okay. And that's where you get people who are saying that I've got everything in my life and I'm happy. I've got everything. I've earned what I want in my life. Interestingly, we see a lot of our elderly, our buzurg, in that kind of that santusht phase where they're saying, that I've done everything in my life. मैं बहुत कुछ कर लिया, मैं बहुत कुछ देख लिया life which, you know, like I've seen everything, I've done everything. हुन मैं संतुष्ट है, like I'm okay. Santok, we talk about contentment. That, you know, I don't need anything more in my life, and we hear a lot of our buzurg talking about that, which is that they don't have anything more that they want to achieve in life. They've kind of accepted that they've lived a very full life. And even when we go to funerals, we like to say this person lived a full life. That's for me my third level. And then I think what I would call the final level of happiness is bliss. And I think that's where Gurbani and Sikhi is trying to get you to. So when we hear the words, let's look at the kind of words that appears in Gurbani by the Bhagats, by the Gurus. What's their everyday experience? The everyday experience, they talk about Anand, they talk about bliss, they talk about euphoria, where they're in this Maha Anand, right? And we have to really ask ourselves, is that our everyday experience? Yeah, because if that's not our everyday experience, then they're doing something that's different to what we're doing. And that's where we have to look at where Gurbani can really get you to. What the Guru is trying to do is to get you to a state where, I mean, I love this line by Bhagat Kabir ji, and he talks about death being very happy.
Oh, really?
And he says, Jis marne te jag dare mere man anand. The death that the whole world is afraid of, that death brings bliss to my mind. He uses the word anand.
Wow.
And he says, Marne hite paye puran param anand. He says, by dying, I'm going to have supreme bliss. Now that's not a common way of thinking.
Exactly.
So what we have to think about is, what are these guys doing? You know, these great Bhagats, these great saints, what are they doing? Because we can't say that in our everyday. We like to say, oh, I'm in Chardi Kala. But in reality, our everyday life is, how are you feeling? Yeah, I'm all right. Not everyone is going through this immense bliss at every moment where they're just blissed out all of the time. If somebody's like that, you think, well, maybe he's on something, like that guy's not normal.
Yeah.
But the Gurus and the Bhagats are talking about their life being in this Chardikala. They're always excited, they're always happy. They're in a state that no matter what life throws at them, they're like, I'm just at a different level in my mindset. And that's a bliss that I think the most common people like you and me, we don't tend to experience. I certainly don't have that on a day-to-day basis. But I think that's where my Guru wants me to be, because I think what the Guru is saying is that experience is possible, and it's possible all the time. And the common man needs to understand that these are essentially just human beings. Well, these are what these Gurus and these Bhagats were. These are human beings who found a way of having that supreme happiness, and that was not related to how much they earned or how much they owned in life.
Then, Bhaji, how can we, like you said, because it's true, you know, I can't say that I'm one of them, how can we be taking the steps, walking on the path to have that state of mind, or at least work towards that state of mind where, you know, we could say, actually, death for me is anand. You know, like, what do we need to do?
How do we get there?
How do we get there? That's it, yeah.
That's a really fundamental question. And to me, how you get there, and by all means, don't think that I'm some sort of expert in this stage, right? But for me, you know, having had the opportunity to sort of spend a lot of time with Gurbani and read Gurbani and really sort of reflect on how I think we can apply that in our life, I think that how we can get there is by first understanding what causes our suffering. So rather than thinking, how do I get happy? Well, it's actually, well, what are you doing right now that means that you're not happy? Happiness isn't something that you have to do much later on in life. It's like actually right here in your life, nothing has to fundamentally change in your life. You don't have to buy a lot of stuff. You don't have to dress a particular way. So what do you have to do? You have to understand, what am I doing in my life that means I'm not happy? So if you identify the things that are causing your unease in your life, that kind of difficulty, that things that just don't make you feel great in your life, and which is everything and anything can do that. Like you could burn your toast and you could feel horrible, right? Now what's the difference is the toast isn't the problem. The problem is how you react to the world. So we need to understand our internal mindset, and says that even if you burn your toast, there's something in your head that says, wow, look how funny that is. You change every scenario. What you do is you change your reaction to it. And I think that's the really important thing about how do you identify what it is. To me, what Gurbani says is your biggest problem, the reason you're not happy in life, is your desires.
Right.
What do we mean by that?
Yeah, like what are desires?
Desires, I simplify it because look, for me, I'm really lucky that at home we have Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj at home, and we take a Hukamnama on a regular basis, and I sit in front of my kids and I have to look at a Hukamnama and try and explain to my children. So I have now sort of fine-tune this ability to take something that sort of seems quite complicated and explain it to a 5-year-old.
Amazing.
And the way I describe desires to my kids, at least, is the statement, I want. And I tell my children, I want is the biggest cause of sadness. If you say I want anything in life, that means you are sad. And that sounds like, well, that's a little bit strange. But what is it, if we break that down a little bit further, as soon as you say I want anything, What you're basically saying is, I don't have. I don't have is clearly a statement of dukh. Because if you say, do you have that? No, I don't. How do you feel? I don't feel very good. I want it. I want identifies first that I don't have something. This is why Gurbani puts calm, desire, as one of the worst things. As your desires are the reason, your trishna, all of these things, Gurbani uses a lot of words for desires, is that is the ultimate root cause of your problem. So I teach my children, anytime you're feeling sad, it's because there's something that you want. Even if you're saying, I don't want this to happen, what you're basically saying is, I want the world to be something else. Right? And that's really important. In everyday scenarios, the moment you feel like you're not happy, the reason behind it is because you don't want what's happening right now. And what you're saying is, I want something more. And that goes for wanting even success in life. Even, you're flicking, you're on the internet and you're doing online shopping and saying, I can't really afford that, but I really wish I had that. That little feeling is basically you're triggering off this little dukh, this little sadness inside you. And what we do is, in our life, we're doing that at every moment. So there's a solution to that. And I tell my kids this solution. The solution to the sadness, which is caused by the statement, I want, is to say, I'm okay.
Okay.
At every moment, whatever is happening, no matter what life throws at you, you say, I'm okay. And that is a very simple way to explain essentially what Gurbani is saying, which is desires cause your suffering and detachment causes your pleasure, which is to say, I'm okay. If I get it, great. If I don't get it, I'm still happy. And what we're doing is we're rewiring our brain. And I'm a computer science guy, right? So I talk about things. I can tell. I talk about things from an IT perspective. And what I honestly say is, Gurbani is like a reprogramming. It's like clearing out bad software. Like our thinking is like a virus, and Gurbani is like reinstalling the software. And you kind of clear out the old virus, the old ways of thinking, and Guruji gives you a new way of thinking. So we have to understand that Gurbani isn't about praying, Gurbani isn't about doing lots of part, it's about actually, what is the Guru saying, and am I doing that stuff? Has the Guru changed the way I think? And the simple way to understand happiness is, every time you want something, you're guaranteed sadness. Wanting equals sadness. To say I'm okay is to separate yourself from the external environment and say, I'm always happy.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I was just thinking, Bhaji, when you were talking, out with the polluted hard drive and in with the completely clear hard drive. Upgrade.
It's an upgrade.
That's it, yeah. And obviously fill that with good thoughts and good things, and that I'm okay. So, Bhaji, you've got young children, and you're teaching, like one of them is obviously 5 years old, and you're reading, reading Bani, but obviously explaining the Hukamnaman to them. From a young child's perspective, how do they then react, or what do they say to you? But do they ever come to you and say, well, Pitaji, I'm a bit upset about this? Or, give me a little bit of an insight into what the kids say to you, because that's really, a 5-year-old is young, and to take in what you're telling them. I'm thinking of when I was 5 years old, I'd be saying, but maybe I wouldn't be at that age, but still, when you think you're really not, you couldn't be able to consume and take that in. How do they react?
For me, I think it's about constantly reinforcing the same message, and by having Guru Maharaj at home and having the ability, and you can do this even by taking an online Hukamnama and just sit with your children. So we do this before they go to school every morning. Before they go to school, the 10 minutes or so before they're walking out the door, we sit down, we go through the Hukamnama, we go through the meaning, and it's about reinforcing that message day in, day out. So when the scenario actually happens where they're feeling a little bit sad, then I can say, is it because you want something right now? Is that causing your sadness? And because they've had that message a lot of time, they'll think, yeah, you're right, it is because of that. Again, one of the things that I do with the Panch Chor, rather than referring to them as thieves, I refer to them as snakes.
Okay.
So I teach them about snakes, and this works particularly well with anger. I say that the angry snake is biting you right now.
Right, okay.
So what I teach them is that anger isn't something to do with them, it's an external thing. It's something that is attacking you. And Gurbani uses the same analogy. When it talks about 5 thieves, it says that basically it's something that's attacking you, it's stealing something from you. And what it's doing, it's stealing your happiness. So whenever they get really angry, I don't try and maybe they're angry at me for some reason because they're like, Dad, you're not letting me do this. I actually don't provoke that anger any further. I try and make myself a little bit calm, and I say, look, okay, let's put the argument that we're having to one side for a moment, and let's just deal with the fact that the angry snake is biting you right now. And because I teach them about the angry snake, and I say, right now the angry snake is biting you, and I want to help you get that snake away from you. And so I teach them breathing techniques,
right,
and I teach them a little bit of meditation right there at that moment. Look, just calm down. Let's breathe together. And me as a parent to you, my responsibility now is not to win the argument. My responsibility to you now is to get that snake away from you. And I hope that as they get more mature, that they start doing that to me. I want them to turn around and say, Dad, the angry snake is biting you, because I get angry. So I want them to turn around, and then that will be a way to create sangat within the family. The family is all helping each other. So I tell them, okay, let's do some big breathing. I don't call it meditation, I call it big breathing. Big breathe in through the nose, out, and then I teach them very simple techniques, and I have a lot of these on our YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
I teach them, I've got something called the dragon meditation, which is basically there's a fire inside you. Your Kaam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ahankar, they're like fires inside you, and they're burning you right now. So every time you say, I want to have that toy, and my brother is playing with that toy, there's a little fire burning inside you. And what does a dragon do? He blows the fire out. So I say, let's get rid of those fires. So you got to teach people on a very, very basic way. And again, this is applied spirituality. This is exactly what the gurus are saying, but how do you apply it on a day-to-day basis? And it's completely relevant to adults as well, which is how do you take your everyday emotional state and make it slightly better through meditation, through the wisdom of the guru.
Yeah, no, I really like that, because that's my next question, Bhaji. Before we go to, we've got 4 minutes till we go to break, but before we do go to break, anger, does that then take away happiness? So for example, if somebody's angry, actually somebody could be really happy, something makes them angry, does that eats into people's happiness, correct?
Remember I talked about I want being the biggest cause of suffering? Your Kaam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Ahankar all sit above desire. This is why Kaam comes first. Because ultimately anger is also another type of Kaam. It's another type of desire. But look, when you're angry at someone, what are you saying? I want you to understand my perspective. I want you to think like me. I want you to do what I want.
Yeah,
isn't that what anger is?
It is.
Anger is basically saying what you're doing is not good enough. I want you to do what I'm telling you to do.
Exactly.
So I want is still the reason why you get angry. So at the root of, so yes, you're absolutely right. Anger does take your happiness away because there's a desire underneath that. So can you now understand that your anger is caused by your desire, and your desire is just a desire, it's just an opinion. You have a particular way, look, let's, for example, you want to make a certain thing for dinner, and I say I want to make something else for dinner. Neither is right or wrong. You have an opinion and I have an opinion. Now anger comes when I'm going to get so agitated by your opinion that I'm going to think I have to do something about it, and I have to shout and scream at you in order to get my way. So ultimately you have to understand that your thought is just a thought. Who cares what you want for dinner or what they want for dinner? Can you control your emotional state independently from your thoughts? Don't worry about what your thoughts are. If you make your dinner, fine. If I make my dinner, fine. And I'm trying to keep it as simple and practical as possible. Is the cause of our arguments comes from our desires, where my thought is such a priority to me that I think my thought is the most important thought in the world.
So really, Bhaji, from what I understand, what you're trying to say is, for example, the mind is really can be your best friend or your worst enemy. To keep yourself happy and to be at least be happy is to kind of eradicate those thoughts which may start like from a small thought to a big thought, and it could then start making you become angry. So try not to dwell on the thought so much, really. Completely.
And this is where your practice, your Naam, Simran and meditation, and I know you're interested in talk about that more maybe in the second half of the show, is that Naam, Simran and meditation allows you to detach yourself from your thoughts. So if you can start becoming aware of your thought, and if you can start realizing, I'm starting to become angry, that is such an important thing to be able to do. To recognize is when a thought comes, and recognize that's going to have consequences if I jump on that thought.
Yeah.
If I go with that thought, it's going to make me angry, it's going to make me shout, it's going to make me do these things. So to Naam Simran meditation is the reason we do those things, is so that we can see our thoughts and we don't necessarily have to engage with that.
Okay, so we'll continue that after the break. So Sangatji, please, if you have just joined us, once again, for those of you that don't know, we have Satpal Viji from Nanak here with us. Please stay with us. We're going to go for a short break, and all the bath, we're going to be continuing to talk to Baji. So do not go anywhere. Enjoy your chai cup and pronte, as I always say, or as I always say as well to Uncle Ji, we're waiting for your lovely pronte that I'm hoping you're going to bring one day on the breakfast show. But please join us back after the break. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.